So, hey there, friend. This is Roger Whitney with a secret special edition of the show. Wow, what a week. Obviously, the markets were tumultuous, but a little scary on the health front, too. So, what we did in the Rock Retirement Club yesterday, Thursday, is we held a special meetup, and we may do more of them, where about 40 of us were on a live video audio call. And we talked about perspective on what's going on and how do we make decisions during some pretty stressful times. So I thought I would share some of that with you. I edited out the conversations and the question and answer that was going on because protect the identity and voices of our members. But I did share a little bit of my perspective as well as our retirement coach, Beach Walker. This was totally ad lib, thinking through a lot of things. I had some organized comments, but I wanted to share it with you. So hopefully this helps you in your journey, maybe brings you a little bit of peace, brings you a little bit of power so you can start to figure out what, if anything, you need to do from a retirement financial perspective to be intentional and still rock retirement. So here's a portion of that meetup that we did last night in the club. We'll probably end up doing more of them. And with that, since I won't be here on the other side, I just want to say, I hope you have a great weekend. Wow, what a day. Market was down 10% today. Good ride. So there was no planned agenda for this. What I thought I would do is just tell you some of the things that I'm doing and thinking, and this could evolve into just a lot of little one lessons and time to chat about things. So, this is obviously this impacts me in terms of obvious clients I work with, but internally and financially and emotionally, just like it does everybody else. So I figured I'd share some of the things I'm doing. Today was really the first day that I had proactively people reaching out and saying, hey, I just need to talk just for some perspective. What I thought I'd do is just talk about the markets and some perspective there and talk about some proactive things we can do. And then we can just share how we're thinking about it, what we're optimistic about and what we want to try to take action on. And I saw everybody was brainstorming the idea of doing early Roth conversions, which is not a bad idea. So I used this analogy a long time ago in a show. But if you play it out, I think it's a healthy analogy to think of these things is when you have huge market downturns, and this is a huge market downturn very, very quickly. I mean, wow, 2 weeks ago, who would have thunk it? But if I always liken them to forest fires. So I'm going to use that kind of analogy. So if we think of a forest, and I'm not a forestry major, so forgive me if I destroy this metaphor. But if you think of a forest, you have trees that are growing and you have healthy stock of trees, the established trees. And then when you have a period of really good seasons, weather-wise, climate-wise, everything else, what do you have? You had a lot of new growth, new trees, you have shrubs and bushes and undergrowth that happens. And the longer you have those good seasons, the more you have this new growth and undergrowth. And over time, what happens is everything starts to compete for resources, right? The water, the sunshine, and all of the undergrowth is sapping resources from the established growth, the stock of trees. And the longer that goes on, the less healthier everything can become. And so a forest fire, which is typically a natural phenomena, is part of nature cycle of clearing out the weaker stock of trees, clearing out the underbrush. And what do you do when you clear that out with a forest fire? Things burn, nutrients go back into the ground, and the healthier stock gets burned and charred and maybe hurt a little bit. And then the nutrients are returned to the healthy stock in the forest. So that's a very healthy thing. Now, the longer you have these really good seasons, the more there's a misalignment of capital or resources in this example, the more fierce that fire can burn. And so if we think of that in an economy, if we think of that as stocks, in an economy, you have the resources aren't nutrients. The nutrients are, equity investment. The nutrients are debt. The nutrients are workers. And the longer you have an economic expansion or all of this growth, the more companies that are started, the more unhealthy or marginal companies can sustain themselves. And they're all sapping debt, investment, human capital in terms of employees, which makes the stronger established players having to compete with these less established players. And all an economic recession is, and equates to a market downturn, is this clears the deck. This can wipe out the underbrush of unhealthy companies or bad players in the economic forest and return the nutrients to the healthier players. It doesn't mean the healthier players don't get hurt, right? From a company perspective. But what ends up happening is the bad players go away, and now there's more capital, there's more debt available, there's more human capital workers for the survivors to hopefully grow. And the longer we have an economic expansion, the more undergrowth of suboptimal economic players, the more fierce it can be. And we've had a 10-year bull market. We've had a 10-year expansion. So it's going to be pretty fierce. But it's necessary. And I get very nervous when we don't have these things because I worry about them being even more fierce when they do actually rear their head. And the difficult part is in planning is to predict when a forest fire is going to happen, because who predicted the coronavirus was going to be the spark? Nobody. And now, I mean, it really started to hit me a little bit more after talking to Tina from Mayo and seeing the NBA season canceled. And you see these major things that are getting canceled. And you're like, whoa, this could really be a lot more than we think. And so unexpectedly, we got a forest fire from some random campfire that nobody saw. So easy to say this too shall pass, and it will. It could get a lot worse from here. And the big worry economically is all of the slowdowns, right? I mean, if you just take a conference I was supposed to go speak at the end of the month was canceled. Okay, that's 2,000 people going to New Orleans. That's hotel, that's air flights, that's entertainment, that's vendors stopping. And the supply chain for manufacturing, if there was a specific part, and I have a gentleman who runs a big distribution firm in Florida, and all his high-end cookware, stoves and such, are not made in China, but there's these two parts that are. And now he's seeing disruptions in his supply chain. So this globalization has that kind of impact, especially with concentration, like we see with the antibiotics. Could there be an issue with 98% of our antibiotics coming from one place? Well, of course. And I think those are some of the good things of some of that adjustments. So what do you do from here? And for me, and sort of like we talked about in January, and I feel really smart right now, I should have really made a bold prediction, because people can make their whole careers and earn lots of money just with one prediction in their life. Dumb luck is good. But I didn't. Ideally, we did everything to prepare for a fire when there wasn't one, right? And that's, if we think of cash reserves, if we think of income floors, those are the fire lines that we hopefully had built around our residence before a fire hit. And although we may get singed, there's no way of the fire jumping to us by having the cash. And so a lot of the conversations I've been having is walking through Hey, remember when we did this and that? All of the money that is quote unquote at risk to fire is really 5 to 10 years plus money, which seems sort of inefficient getting 1.5% in a CD or a bond or something like that. But now it allows us to be positioned with that pie cake. So what's at risk is okay, because 5, 10 years from now, just like '08, you saw it on a chart, you remember it, but it was a blip probably 10 years from now. And if you look at charts right now, it's interesting to see like a 20, 30-year chart of the S&P, and you go back and look at '08, which we all remember how traumatic that was. It's not that traumatic on the chart anymore. We had that 50% drop and then and God willing, we'll have some version of that whenever this plays itself out. And I think there's probably a lot more to come, just simply because of the economic disruption. Then we're going to go to, once we level off the virus, then we're going to start getting the numbers and the revisions downward in economic, forecasts and earnings forecasts. But that's why we try to do all the work before the fire is going to be there, right? Now, I always think of when I look back at my personal life, but also in business life, the most painful times are when we had the most exponential growth opportunities. From personally, when you're under fire and you have this stress put upon you, stress brings clarity and awareness to a lot of things, and that spurs you into action. And if you're awake and you learn and you identify, what does this make possible? What of my own crap can I take care of while I'm awake? You're going to come out and boomerang a lot better. And I think that's an important question for us to ask is, what does this make possible for us in our own personal life? Because we're so aware of this. Maybe it's building the income floor. Maybe it's reshuffling our priorities and realizing that over planning and overthinking this or delaying pre-retirement or retirement doesn't make sense. We start to get our priorities back in order. I remember after 9/11, I was in Addison. I remember watching it with a friend all day in a downtown office. I worked at a big firm at the time. Do you recall this? I remember it was around 3 or 4 after sitting there shell shocked like all of us, this sudden urge. I lived about an hour away at the time, to get home, just to be home, to be around my family. And I remember the reprioritization of what was important to me going through that until you get back to normal. And I think this is sort of one of those moments where we need to take advantage of it and keep asking ourselves, one, do I have my fire lines in place? Or are there any little bushfires I need to take care of, financially speaking? Yeah, it is hard to believe, Timothy. Two, if there aren't any bushfires, what does this make possible? And David and some others, Andrea, I think, whether it's Roth conversions, contributions to Roth IRAs and things like that. I've had some conversations with some clients who were in the midst of, had just put together the pie cake, and we were investing the upside, the higher ends of the cake, but we were dollar cost averaging. When you have big chunks of money, I prefer to do that just from a psychological perspective. And what we've been doing is discussing and saying, okay, well, let's start increasing these dollar cost average. Let's start increasing the frequency or the amounts and accelerate that a little bit because things are on sale. But I think, what does this make possible is really important. But now is the time to look for little bushfires or, faults in your fire line. Absent those, and if you feel like, wow, I got a great firewall, I have the income, I have my 2 years cash, I have whatever the income floor is. Now's the time to, it sounds silly, congratulate yourself by being intentional, because most people don't do any of that, even if they know about it. And so, Dan Crosby, who we're going to have in the club,
who's a behavioral finance guy. Psychologically, and I feel this, and my big risk for myself is always owning too much of the responsibility and pain with clients, because you feel like you're failing them even though you're not. Um, and psychologically, what happens is the emotions of fight, flight, freeze. We're not fighting saber-toothed tigers. We're fighting, a lot. I read an article recently where really that fight, or freeze, and the psychological impacts are exactly the same. We do it in terms of money management and finances and everything else. So psychologically, the scarring is just the same as if it was literally life or death. So I'm always cautiously optimistic, and I like to be intentional, and I'm running around with every client. And what I do internally is, in fact, I tasked Jamie today, as I'm going to have all these calls, is we're going to go through, okay, let's update all the numbers and let's stress test the plan. Let's look at our cash reserves. Let's talk about our spending, and then let's find some little actions, and reaffirm that there aren't any faults in our fire line. I'm going through that internally with clients, and this is something you can do for yourself, because I think one thing that really is important is that you do something. If you have some stress, you need to do something. Now, what could that something be? That something does not have to be drastic. I will give you a very silly example. I don't sleep very good in markets like these, even though I feel like I'm not that worried about it. But about 1:00 in the morning yesterday, I just couldn't get to sleep. So I had my phone and I'm just scrolling around. And what I did, this is very huge. This is a big step. So you got to be careful if you do this. I went into my Apple phone. I looked at my subscriptions and I canceled Apple Arcade. I canceled a few silly subscription things that I was paying $5 a month for that I hardly used or didn't really need to use. Will it make a difference in my life? No. Does it feel good? Yes. I did something. And so I think you need to figure out what the something is for you, but it is good to take action. And I think of this with clients in conversations. If we think we have a 5-year floor, times like these, it is not about understanding volatility and just sucking it up, because that's not rational. It's about actions, and an action a lot of clients takes, and they're more than willing to do their fair share, is they look at their needs and their wants and their wishes, and whether they really need to or not from an economic standpoint. What they do is like, well, we're going to make some trade-offs on these wants and wishes. That wish can wait for another year. This want, rather than be the $10,000 bike, maybe I'll just ride my current bike, or maybe it's a $2,000 bike. Those kind of decisions can quickly help turn a 5-year floor into a 6 or 7-year floor. And they feel empowering. So don't discount the need to do something, because it's good for the soul. It gives you agency, because the worst feeling is just feeling like you're being acted upon and you have no control, and you're at the whims of the sea in a bad storm with your sails down.
Hey, Roger, one thing I'd like to say, I know we've mentioned it in the message boards, but a lot of people don't read those. One thing you can do, this is the first time almost all of us in the retirement zone have had to deal with a major correction like this. So you can learn a lot about your tolerance for them in retirement, because it might not be the same as when you were 35 years old and earning money. And so think about how you've reacted to this, and if it's caused too much stress. Once we get out of this correction, don't do anything now unless you absolutely have to. But once we're out of it and things have normalized, you might want to adjust your asset allocation if it was a little too heavy in equities for you. So just learn from this experience. We haven't had one in quite a number of years.
Yeah, my hope is that through little conversations like this and conversations in the clubhouse, is I look to you guys, just like it's a little more difficult for me to do this with clients. I look to you guys for wisdom and sanity. I'm not watching financial news much. if I'm going to let people speak into my life and give perspective, I would rather it be the community we have in the club than some talking head that is an expert that doesn't know anything about me or doesn't know where I'm at, or that I don't know where they come from. So my hope is with the community that if we need to have an outlet to vent, cry, or ask for help or some perspective, this is the place to ask for it. There's plenty of us, including myself and Beach Walker and Tracy, that are happy to get on a quick phone call and talk about things. And this is a good place to do that, a safe place to do that with intelligent, thoughtful perspective and not reactionary. And then to your point, Beach Walker, I think that's something that there can be some big value in. And then as we go through this, we can debrief it and figure out, okay, what should we be doing better next time? What can we learn from what we just went through to be intentional about just creating a better life? I appreciate you all. We're going to do more of these as needed, and maybe they'll be longer or shorter, or maybe there'll be a certain perspective, but we'll do them randomly. So feel free to reach out to anybody. And I so appreciate everybody. It's good to see you. And I'm going to do some self-care and maybe have one more glass of wine before I go to bed.